professionals, like many of you here today. We knew that if we built a health plan that was simple to buy, easy to use, had great customer service, and most of all was affordable, we could compete against the big insurance plans who only focus on serving big companies. After spending 5 years getting into the Colorado market and completing a successful proof of concept, we successfully closed a $50 million round of growth funding earlier this year. We're now about to expand to 3 additional states later this year, hire more than 400 employees to support our growth, and eventually be in more than 10 states by 2025. I wish each of you good luck in your startup and growth pursuits. And as you think about your upcoming health insurance needs, I hope you consider fellow growing startup Friday Health Plans. Open enrollment starts November 1st. Check us out at fridayhealthplans.com.
Hey everyone, and sorry about that echo. We're just living our 2020 selves. So welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Jake Cohen, the Growth Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for our very first ever virtual Denver Startup Week. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we are more powerful when we come together as a community to share ideas and help make each other better. And here we are virtually showing the world what Denver is made of. And today we have a guest from out of town, which is a unique advantage of the virtual Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a place where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the intersection of those identities. There's something for everyone at Denver Startup Week, and we thank you for joining us. Now over to you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jake. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are located today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me in this session. And thank you to Jake and the whole Denver Startup Week team for putting this amazing event together. So today we're going to be talking about how can you go about scaling customer support. And I'm going to be sharing our journey at Handshake and what we've done, what we've learned, and some takeaways for all of you. And I'm really looking forward to having this be really a dialogue and conversation and getting your feedback and ideas and stories as well. But first, a little bit more about me. I'm Jordan Pedraza, and I am the Director of Global Support, Trust and Safety, and Documentation at Handshake. I've been at Handshake for almost 4 years now, and I'm coming to you from Oakland in the Bay Area. And there's my handle there on Twitter if you want to connect during or after. And my background has mostly been in education, technology, and customer experience for the past 10 years. So I've done things like account management, community management, program management, all the managements, and now I'm doing support. And outside of work, I am really obsessed with Dippin' Dots. I'm really good at parallel parking. I think I would win the gold if it was an Olympic event. I really love celebrity gossip and conspiracy theories. And I'm really passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's important in any industry, but especially with tech, where we're building tools that have a huge impact. I think it's really important we have the teams and companies reflect the communities we're serving in that. So that's a bit more about me. And then wanted to share a little bit more about Handshake and our setup and organization before we talk about scaling. So Handshake is a college career network, and we partner with 3 sides of the marketplace. So college students and new grads, employers ranging from mom and pops to Fortune 500s, and career centers at colleges and universities across North America and the UK. And our goal is to level the career and opportunity playing field by helping students, no matter who they are, where they go to school, or who they know, or how they identify, build meaningful careers. We've learned from the last Great Recession that that first job out of college can really set the stage for your career. We found for students that didn't get that first job that really required a bachelor's degree, they remain underemployed, almost half of them 10 years later. So our goal is to try to mitigate that as much as possible. And then also work with employers and companies in building teams and partnering with the career centers at schools to connect the two. So that's what we do. And then a little bit more about our Handshake support team. So we're a team of almost 30, a mix of full-time and part-time, and I'll talk about why that matters in a bit. And we've been fully distributed before it was cool. So in our beginning of Handshake, support has always been located across the US and now in the UK. As far as the channels we provide, we're pretty straightforward there. We got email, phone, we do lots of webinars, and we have some community forums for employer and education partners. We did experiment with chat earlier this year and last year, but that is no more. And if anyone wants to chat about that, let me know. And as far as our scope, we're looking at almost 200,000 tickets coming in this year. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have documentation with our internal knowledge base and our external help center, which we'll talk more about in a bit. We got trust and safety. So looking at any moderation across our network with messaging, jobs, potentially fraudulent users or activity, and investigating that when that happens. And then we have the stack and operations that support everything, which we're going to talk a lot about today too. So we have support ops and engineering, and we run pretty hefty voice of customer product feedback processes. So that's a little bit about us and our team. And but first I want to know who's in the room with me today. I would love for you all to just enter in the chat where you're dialing in from today, what you do, and a little bit more about your company. Are you B2B, B2C, or both? Hey, Robin, thanks for joining. Cool. Awesome. All right. Nice. Cool, like mix of different backgrounds in here, a little bit of B2B and some B2C. Yeah, really cool to know. All right, so here's our agenda for today. Basically 3 kind of themes we wanted to talk through. So infrastructure, prevention, and efficiency. Infrastructure, we'll be talking about your stack. What are the things you can build and invest in and track to help you make the right decisions and be really agile. Prevention, we're going to be looking at how to identify opportunities to reduce or remove volume altogether. And then also help your customers and users help themselves and help your team help themselves. And then that actually segues into efficiency, where we'll be talking about some ways to get through the volume as quickly as possible without sacrificing quality. So let's first dig into infrastructure. So before I start talking about tools and integrations like technology, I think it's really important to make sure your company and team infrastructure is in place too. When it comes to support in customer experience, it should not be up to just the support or customer experience department. It really takes a village, and we need to cultivate strong, collaborative, cross-functional partnerships, because customer experience is a company-wide effort and it's a team effort. So it really takes a continued commitment from everywhere across your company. So whether you're representing support here today or customer experience or not, we all have a role to play in making this happen. And we're going to see this play out in a lot of the examples that we have learned and seen. But now talking about your technology. So there's definitely a lot of tools out there and we use a lot of them. But here are some of the key ones I want to highlight that have really made a difference for us in our infrastructure and how we scale. And I think when you're looking at different tools that you can use, it's important to choose tools and mash them together that allows you to understand the unique nature of your business and your customers and your product. And so for us, we're both B2B and B2C. So we have to think about what information do we need to know about our customers and our accounts, and then how do we triage and track data accordingly. So as far as the main inputs we got, we use Zendesk for our ticketing system, Salesforce for our CRM, and Solvi in our help center to help suggest articles and answers when people are writing in. As far as storing all of our data, we got Snowflake, which actually I think is going public today, so it's our snow day, and Fivetran. Fivetran allows us to sync data from Zendesk into Looker, which is where we do our reporting and analysis. So that's where we store all of our ticketing data. That's where we store a lot of our customer data and usage trends. And then we also use good old Google Sheets. That actually powers our own staffing model, and it's just really nifty for us. So which metrics matter? Before we dive into some of the specific formulas and tools that we use for our infrastructure, I think it's important to keep in mind what's really most important in your customer support operation and your customer experience. And so the first one I would say is first response time. It's industry standard, and it's what your customers are going to really notice when working with you. Then after that, I would say net promoter score. So how likely are people going to refer you to other users out there? In support, it's common to use satisfaction on each ticket, and that's helpful too, but that doesn't give us enough information on how the user and customer feels about the whole company and the product and the experience. Handle time is going to be a really helpful one. I'm going to show how you can use that in your staffing model and for prevention and efficiency opportunities. Volume is pretty straightforward. We have to understand what trends are we seeing. Is it happening in certain areas of the product or with different users? So we can use that to make certain decisions. And then finally, cost per ticket. This is a great tool if you want to compare how the growth of your business is doing, but also how is your spend going in support and customer experience. So let's keep those metrics top of mind and see how they come up here. But the heart of infrastructure, I think, when it comes to scaling is giving yourself a way to kind of predict as best as possible what's to come, how much volume you're going to get, and how much staff you need to cover it. And back in our old days in 2017, our staffing model was and hope for the best. And that doesn't really scale because if you get a huge surge in volume, you're unprepared for it. You're going to burn out your team. You have to use a lot more company resources to get through it, and your customers are not going to be happy. And now, while we can't always perfectly predict everything that's going to happen, so that we can be more prepared than ever. And so our staffing formula looks like this. Basically, it's 3 parts. We calculate forecasted volume for a given month. We subtract that by how many tickets we think our full-time team will be able to do. And then we take that difference and divide it by what we think our part-time staff can do. So then that tells us if we're going to be under or overstaffed, so if we need extra help or not. So we're going to do some math today. So let's first look at how we calculate forecasted volume. So to predict the future, we can look at our past. And so let's say we want to answer the question of how much volume do we expect to get this month in September 2020? Well, let's look at September 2019 and see how much volume we've had there, and then how has our volume changed in the past year. So let's say this time last year, we had 10,000 total tickets for the month. And as we've been tracking year on year, month on month, how our volume has changed, it's pretty much doubling right now. And that's because we've built a lot of new virtual products for our community, which is great. So that means there's a lot of popularity and usage and tickets that come up. So basically things have doubled. So that means we're forecasting about 20,000 tickets for the month of September. So now that we have a sense of what kind of volume is coming in, then we're going to take how many tickets full-time staff can take, and then how many tickets part-time staff can take if we have them. So how we do this is we basically take for full-time the number of staff, multiply that by the working days of the month, and then multiply that by how many tickets they can do each day per person. So for full-time, when you do all that, we get around 6,000 tickets that our full-time team should be able to take. And then for part-time, it's a little different because they're working hourly. We first start with how many hours they're working per day. So let's say it's 8, and then we multiply that by the working days, and then the number of tickets they can do per hour. So for full-time, we're doing it by day, but for part-time, we're doing it by hour because some people may work 20 hours a week or things like that. So for part-time, it tells us we're going to have about 1,200 tickets that each part-time staff can do. So we ultimately want to answer the question of how much staff will we need for September 2020. So we plug in our numbers. We got 20,000 forecasted tickets, subtract that by the full-time team, and then divide that by what part-time team can do. So that gives us around 12. So that means we're going to need an extra 12 part-time staff that can help us supplement the extra volume we're getting in for this month. And then let's look at another scenario where you might be overstaffed. Let's say for us, it's going to be quieter in November or December. So we're only forecasting about 3,000 tickets. Well, that means we have plenty of people to cover that, and we're going to have some people freed up for extra time. So in months like this, we don't need extra part-time staff, and we even have some extra full-time staff. So you can, in those months, you can devote people to other projects, documentation, product development and feedback, things like that, areas that they want to really grow in. So that's how you can make the most out of your resources when things are changing a bit. And then talking a little bit about cost per ticket and understanding the ratios of your staff to customers and volume. So over time, ideally, as your business is growing, you don't want to have your spend grow at the same rate because ultimately your finance team might not love you and your business may not be as healthy. And so to do this, we can look at all of the costs that go into having our team, add that all up, and then divide that by the number of tickets that we're getting each month. And so that gives us the cost per ticket. And so over time, you want to see, is that changing at the same rate our business is? Like if we're growing 2x or 4x or 5x, is our spend going at that same rate? Or are we able to keep that relatively at the same amount or maybe increasing at a much slower pace? So those are some things that you can track over time to make sure things are growing sustainably. Some other things to keep in mind when it comes to staffing models and thinking about your infrastructure. Always check yourself before you wreck yourself. A model is just that, a model. It's not perfect. It's a living, breathing thing. You have to keep reviewing and gut checking. But the big thing I would say is if you suspect you may have a lot of variability in your volume or seasonality, that's where leveraging part-time staff, whether in-house that you hire on your own or working with lots of agencies out there to help you flex up or down. And you especially want to account for new product launches. We're going through that right now. We have a lot of volume and interest in our virtual products. And so if you know you're launching something really big that's changing the behavior of users on your platform, you might want to overinvest a little bit to get ready for that surge. And then some other things you always want to account for. How often are people out of office? When are people onboarding or offboarding? Are there other types of work that the team is doing, especially outside of the queue that you're not tracking? And even for the things you are tracking, how often do things change? We've noticed, and we'll talk about this in the next section, there are certain features or certain user types that take longer than others. And so we use weights to kind of account for that because not all tickets take the same amount of time. And then keep tracking all the trends so you can feed that into your model and try to get it to be as accurate as possible. All right, so to kind of wrap up this first section on infrastructure, your stack is really powerful and important. It's going to allow you to track clean historical data and then try to model and forecast out the future so you can effectively spend your resources where you need to. And then keep reviewing and gut checking things, updating things. It's a living, breathing thing, as I said, so make sure you second guess and check your assumptions all the time. And question everything, sweat the details, have people outside the team take a look at it. I've partnered closely with our finance and data and biz ops teams with our model. Because again, the goal here is just to get it to be as nuanced as possible so that it really reflects the needs of your business. All right, so I would love to hear from all of you if you want to use the chat or raise your hand if you want to speak. I would love to hear about what kind of tools or integrations do you use and what's been helpful. And how do you think about your staffing and infrastructure? How do you plan ahead? What kind of assumptions do you have? And what do you feel like is the most important to keep in mind? Okay, I see one question here. What metrics do you use to assess product launch? How much does creation of self-service help impact this? And then Google Sheets and Excel, some of the tools you're using. Great, yeah, that's like us too. So what metrics do we use to assess a product launch? That's a great question. From a support perspective, we're able to kind of look at, on average, by different categories, how much volume we expect each month. Around those areas. So when we're launching something new, we kind of use that as a baseline to see, okay, let's say for appointments, we usually see like 300 tickets during September from our schools. So if we were to launch something new, we just updated a bunch of reporting features for schools. Do we see similar volume to that? Do we see less or more? So that's kind of one thing we look at in support to see, is this going to be more complicated and involved or not? And then secondly, going into self-service rates. So when we do launch a new product, we have new articles added to our help center. And we use Solvi to help calculate the self-service rate on those articles. So which percentage of time, are they getting the answer? And so we know our average, and I think I'm going to mention this in the second section on prevention. But I think our baseline for EDU features is around 20%, and then for employer and students around 50%. So we look at those articles and we see how is that self-service rate comparing to the baseline we typically see across all articles. So if it's really low, okay, we need to add more content. We need to look at the actual questions or issues that are coming up and then add that in to get that self-service rate to be better. And then obviously volume, and we're going to talk about that next, actually. We're going through this with our virtual product right now. We've had a lot of volume in the last few weeks. And so we were able to see different trends and add new categories to track that, and then put that in nice little reports and dashboards and share that out with product managers, engineering teams, designers, success, and marketing, so we can figure out what our plan of attack is. What can we change in the product to make it more intuitive and usable? What can we add to our documentation to make it easier to work with? What can we promote? What guides or resources can we put together? And then how can we arm success with that too, so that they can help customers be ready for that? So those are some of the things that we look at when we launch new things. All right, well, let's go on to the second section. It's definitely going to talk a bit more about that. So I first mentioned tracking volume is a huge one for us. And also I'm a fan of handle time because not all tickets are the same. Not all things take the same time. So that helps you get a little bit more nuance. And so here's an example of some of the things we track. We look at different categories in our product, and we see what's the volume for a given amount of time and average minutes per ticket that is spent on these. And so here's kind of a debate here for us. It's, do we focus more on things that have a lot of volume or the things that take a lot of time? And for us, we decided to look more at things that may not come in as often, but they take a lot of time, because that is where there's more bottlenecks for your customers and your teams. And then another thing to think about is what's strategic to your business. So we know for our schools, for example, their ability to report effectively on the impact of Handshake is really important for them. And then interviewing, that's how students get jobs. That's how employers hire. So that's also pretty important to us. So those are areas we decided to focus on. And what are some things that we did? Well, when we dug into the volume trends, we learned that schools needed easier ways to report on the data, like all the interviews that were happening or anything else happening in the platform, and be able to make changes on the fly. Because we've learned with recruiters, their schedules change, they need to have a lot of flexibility. So we added some quick button action tools for you to do that in the product. You have a way to just do a quick download into a sheet if you want, and then you have a way to change your interview schedule with the click of a button. And so these are kind of one of the scenarios where, if you invest it in this for a sprint or two versus having to hire more support reps, that's an important question. And while I always love to grow my team, I'd also rather prevent the volume if we can to keep customers happy and using it, and then spend our resources where we really need it. And so this investment, we made these changes back in 2017, and it's several years later, this investment is still paying off. In that time, we've grown 10x from 100 to 1,000 schools. And we've seen 8% less interview volume over that time. And we've cut the handle time almost in half. So that's better for our customers, and that's better for our team. Another example here with reporting, we've learned over time all the different kinds of reports that schools need to create. And so we decided, okay, well, let's give them some pre-made templates so they don't have to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch. That also took a lot of time for us to do on the team too. So put that in the product. And so when we added that, we were around 450 schools, and now we've doubled to that. And we're seeing 5% less reporting volume. And the handle time on that used to be a half hour, and now it's down to around 15 minutes. We've actually added some even more reporting updates where schools can create their own reports and share it with the whole network. Because there's a lot of great best practices we see our schools create. So now we're kind of removing ourselves as the middleman, and I think that's going to have a huge impact too. And then another example of this is more on trust and safety. And I know there's a lot going on in this slide, but the gist of it is account suspensions. So if we notice you have violated our terms of service, or your website isn't valid, or your email domain doesn't match your company domain, we suspend you. So we make sure there isn't fraudulent activity. But it's not a great experience for the user if they're actually a legit user and they don't know why. And so we're now looking at automating this whole process. We're looking at what things happened, telling them the reason they were suspended, and then giving them the option to correct it on their own without having to have us intervene. And then if they still need help, we're there. But right now, before we're rolling this out, we get around 3,000 fraud flags per month. And so that calls for a few additional agents to cover that. But instead, once we roll this out, that's going to eliminate all that volume. And then maybe we'll get a handful of things we have to follow up on. So this is one where it definitely is taking a few more sprints to invest in, but it's going to pay off in an immense way and keep our community safe, which is really important. And then talking a little bit about self-service. So it's really important we make it easy to find answers. There's a lot of reports out there saying different generations of users and how they prefer to get help. And I'm not saying every user prefers to not talk to a person. There are definitely some people that do, but we're definitely finding in kind of newer generations, millennials, Gen Z, and I think we're calling it Gen C after this. They prefer to just get the answer on their own and move on. That's really going to help them get unblocked and get moving. And so for us, we've learned we have to treat our help center as a product. It's not just a link farm. It's not just a place to list everything we got and then you go figure it out. And so we've learned our users are very visual. We even have to spell out where they are. Actually, in the old days, we didn't even say it was our help center. So people thought it was our product. And we're searching for usernames and emails in the search bar. And then we've learned as we've added a lot more material and there's more complexity to our product and features, we've had to rethink how we approach information architecture on our help center. And this is an ongoing thing. So before, we could do just 8 different icons and that was enough, but then now we have too many features. So we really have to break it down first by user type and then go from there. So the other thing we've learned is making search more prominent. It makes it easier to find the answers that you need. But again, it's important to do research with your users and audience that you serve to see what they prefer. But another big thing we've learned, particularly when you're launching a new behavior changing feature, people love guides. They love things kind of packaged together in a kit. So we've tried to incorporate this in our help center and then also in our marketing materials. So in our help center, under each user type, we kind of group things under certain categories. And then we added the ability to see recently viewed articles and then show you related suggested articles. So we're using Zendesk for our help center. They have custom themes that you can do to add this. So it's really wonderful. We've seen the bounce rate go down on our help center. Pages on each session go up, time on page go up. It's really wonderful. And then here's an example of more of our kind of marketing like kits, where we pick some of the top popular articles, we link off to them in the kit, give them some other templates or resources that they can leverage. So we've seen a lot of time spent on our kits as well, just make it easy for people to find what they want. And then, the other cool thing with self-service and documentation is it can partner closely with product. So for our virtual features, we have technical requirements article and troubleshooting steps that people can access from our help center. But then our lovely product and engineering team links off to that in the actual product. So when someone's in the middle of a session and we're not able to connect to their camera or mic, we link off to our help center guide so that they can unblock themselves without having to get in touch with us. So I highly recommend having your documentation or knowledge person or team work closely with product and eng to see where can you surface documentation in the product. And then I mentioned some of the tools we've used for our help center. I already mentioned Solvi, that suggests answers when people are writing in. And then we also use Algolia to power our search engine in our help center. So these are really powerful tools that help expand access to all the content that we have. And I mentioned some of the rates we've seen so far. This prevents a lot of volume and a lot of time. So it helps unblocks our customers with having to intervene. And then we don't have to spend time on those things. We can focus on more complex, higher impact areas. So don't be afraid to use third parties to help you out with self-service. And then another last tool I wanted to mention is community. Now, this may depend on your industry, user type, or product, but if your users are kind of relationship driven, they're collaborative, not competitive, they're already connecting, I think it's worth a shot. And so we've definitely seen this in the higher ed community and a little bit in the employer community. So we're using Zendesk as our community platform here. And what's really cool here in this example, so Erin from one of our schools posted asking, how do I automate a job blast? And Erin could have probably asked support and we would have been happy to help her. But what's cool here is Julie responded within 4 minutes, not only just helping her out, but including an article that we wrote on it. So it was a twofer on that one. So yeah, if your community is already very collaborative and wants to help each other out, bring them together, but on your platform so that you still have visibility and you can kind of nurture it, but it will also reduce volume for you. And here are some other metrics you can think about when looking at self-service and if it's working and making a difference and where do you want to invest. And so there's some similarities between the help center and community from my experience. Traffic is a big one. If people aren't going to it, figuring out why, where are they coming from or not, and trying to optimize for that. And then on the help center front, self-service rate, how often are people getting their answers, and bounce rate, are they bouncing once they come? Because if they don't stick around, your help center is not going to be that useful. And then also looking at how much are they engaging with the material, or how many pages are they visiting, how much time are they spending, and see how that changes over time as you change up your material and how you present it. And then also looking at the number of times no results come up in a search and what kind of terms are coming up so you can add content for that. On the community front, so in addition to traffic and visits and how many people are following, you also want to see are people responding to each other? Because if people are just posting and no one engages, it's a ghost town and you don't want that. And then you also want to see the actual activity and volume there. So are there lots of threads? Are people commenting? How is that changing over time? And then also, I think there's a rule of ratios in the community. You can't expect everyone to be a poster or commenter. If anything, I think I've heard there's a 1 to 10 to 90 rule. So the smallest group will be posters, about 10% of them will be commenting, and then the rest will be following and lurking. But that's okay, because lurkers will still get to see all the content and best practices and answers too. And that's where you can reduce your volume. So those are some things that you can look at on the self-service front and prevention. So to kind of summarize this prevention theme, it's thinking like customer service and experience, but acting like a PM. So tracking all the trends on different categories or features and how long things take, either for your team or your customers. Those can be great ways to find pain and address them. And then treat your self-service strategy as a product. So do user research, show different prototypes, have people test, get feedback before you roll things out, and monitor to see how things go. We've done that with our help center this year. We redesigned it, and that's been really helpful. And not kind of imposing our own biases on what we think help centers and self-service should be, but actually what our customers really need. They love guides, they're more visual. There's certain terms that they use that we may not think of. So act like a PM in that sense there. And then don't be afraid to get other help and outside integrations to expand access to your resources. All right, so now let's talk about efficiency, and then we'll open up more for Q&A. I'm just gonna check in the Q&A here to see if there's any things covered yet. Okay, don't really see anything right now. So we'll just go to efficiency and then revisit. So just wanted to do a little exercise with you all to have us thinking about efficiency and what impacts that. We all like to think we can multitask, and I'm sure we're all trying to do it these days even more. But just to kind of bring this point home, here's a little exercise to kind of do mentally, or if you want to write it down. Just think of 3 ways to kind of categorize this information. So we have Arabic numbers, Roman numerals, and the alphabet. And so see how fast you can go when you have to think of or write down the numbers 1 to 10 vertically. And shout out to anyone that remembers all the Roman numerals. Okay, cool. So we did basically by vertically. Now let's do it again, but go horizontally. So you'll want to do Arabic number 1, Roman numeral 1, alphabet A. Then Arabic 2, Roman numeral 2, alphabet B. So let's try to do that mentally or write that down. Okay, so I'm going to guess that we probably felt some differences between those two approaches. Typically, the first one goes a lot faster because we're not context switching as much. We can just think of one lane and kind of complete that and then move on to the next thing. Whereas with this one, we got to think of a lot of different things all at the same time and kind of keep track. And so that's what slows us down. And I think that's what's important to keep in mind when it comes to efficiency. So how does this come to life in customer support and experience? Well, again, here's where you can track handle time and look into the nature of the questions across different user types or features to understand how does that impact your workflows? How does that impact context switching? And so just some examples that we've seen. So let's say we're working with Spelman College, one of our education partners, and they're asking about a discrepancy they're seeing in the number of registered students from an event between a report that they downloaded and what they're actually seeing in the product. And they want to know, how do we get the accurate number? And so for them, well, we have to know the background about Spelman. Where's their account health? What tools are they using? What kind of fair was it? What's the goal? And so that's very personalized to them. That's not going to be the same for all of our schools. So that ticket's going to take a bit more time, usually at least 15 minutes. Whereas when we look at employer and student users, so let's say Deloitte, for example, and a student user at Spelman, commonly their questions are pretty universal. There's only one way to do a certain action. So let's say an employer might ask, how do I add more reps at a fair? Or a student might ask, how do I register for that fair? And so there's no personalized ways to do it. It's just kind of one macro or one article that can answer that question. So that usually takes 3 minutes. And so if you tried to blend all of these things together, that would be quite a leap for our team. And so those are the things that we look at to see where does it make sense to specialize versus generalize. And that's really ultimately the question. I wish I could tell you it's always one or the other. I think it just always depends. But it's something to keep looking at and revisiting. And so just another example that we came up with here. So let's say we had 5 main queues on our team. We have tech support, servicing education partners, premium employer partners, core employers and students, and trust and safety. But the thing is, all of these queues have a different number of staff assigned to them. And then there's different volume for each and different SLAs and thresholds that we have to meet. So like, let's say for more of our enterprise areas like tech and EDU and premium, they have a lower threshold to keep waiting. Whereas for our consumer and moderation things, we have a little bit more leeway. But most importantly for enterprise, they expect and need live phone support. And so for that, you have to have a certain number of staff to do it. And before, when we had these more specialized, dedicated named queues, for EDU, we could only do up to 8 live calls per hour for them. And then we couldn't do live phone support for premium employers. So that wasn't really going to keep working for us. So instead, what we did was we combined EDU and premium because we learned, well, they're both enterprise. We both have to look at the same tools and integrations. We got to look at Salesforce a lot. We have to work with sales and success a lot. And they're already working closely together in the product and space anyway. So it kind of makes more sense to pool there. And most importantly, if we wanted to be able to give live phone support to premium too, let's combine the staff together, and then that will double how many calls per hour that we can take. And that's been huge for us right now because everyone's doing their virtual fairs and we're able to help them in real time because of that. So this is an example of where it may make sense to pool and generalize to maximize coverage. And then sometimes you might find other areas where you can pool and specialize. So you can kind of have the best of both worlds. And another system we've created is an expert system. So there's certain areas of the product that people kind of really own, and they teach and mentor and help others, or can kind of handle more escalated things. So whether that's certain areas of the employer side or student or operational things. And so we've noticed when these people get to really specialize in that area, focus on the same area of the product and the same types of tickets over and over, they can be up to 80% faster than everyone else on the team. Similarly with virtual right now, we've actually created some new specialized queues that only focus on like common user account or company account tasks. And then there's one on our actual virtual fairs product. And so people are able to go through that much faster than kind of combining it all together. So sometimes it makes sense to pool everything together. Sometimes you have to break it up a little bit. But the benefit of having some expertise is that can extend beyond the queue. That can be great for developing training materials internally or externally, helping with your documentation and even with product development. And that's been really helpful for us, especially with virtual. And then speaking of knowledge and self-service, so I talked about it earlier with customers, but it also applies to our teams. There's going to be things that your customers don't need to have access to or see, but you still need to document. And especially now, if your team is newly distributed and working in that kind of a setting, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. That's how knowledge remains in silos in people's brains. And then what happens if they're out? What happens if they leave? What happens if they're caught up in something else? So there's lots of ways to do internal knowledge bases. I've seen docs, sheets, wikis, and third-party tools. For us, we use Guru. They've been wonderful and allows us to create our own collections and folders of different types of content and knowledge. And then we can create short little cards or articles on information to use. And so one example of this that's helped us save a lot of time, we have to do audit logs quite a bit to look up what action was taken in the product and when, getting all the receipts. But there was only a few people on the team that could do that. And the back and forth was crazy. It took like 3 hours, or sorry, 3 days usually. But then now we've created this collection of pre-made audit log templates, and it's cut down the handle time for people to 3 minutes. So they could just pop that in and use it, and they're on their way. So this is where internal knowledge is definitely worth it and can help you be more efficient. Some other things to keep in mind, and we've definitely learned this with virtual recently, if you need to get a lot of contextual information to triage and troubleshoot a ticket more effectively, it can be helpful to have an in-app form where people can share what's happening and then collect even more context so we can have all that at the ready. So this is actually with our virtual fairs product where people can report a technical issue directly from the app, and we can see the user, the fair, the company or school that's involved, the description of the issue, and then all the other information we need to see what's going on. So their browser, the version, the OS, the device. And most of the time, that contextual information that we've gotten helps us get to the root of the issue. So wherever you need that extra data and you don't want to create more back and forth asking for it from your customers, it's really helpful to collect that from the app. And then another thing, especially with a new feature launch, if you know or think you're going to have gnarly investigations, you're going to have to investigate what happened. Maybe not everything is going to launch out the gate right away to customers, but you want to arm yourselves with how you can pull that information and data. You can develop a run book with your engineering team to get a leg up on that. And so we actually did that with our team, and Robin, who's here with us, helped me with this. And so we put together a sheet documenting all of our logs. What are the names of our controllers and endpoints? How's the response? What does it mean? How do we interpret that? And so before we launched the ability for schools to report on everything, we had one of our early fairs with Carnegie Mellon, and they wanted to get some data on how their fair was going. And so we were able to use these audit logs on the fly, like on a live call, to give them some of that information. So it really goes a long way in helping your team get ready for what's to come. All right, so that's kind of the last thing I would say about efficiency. It's really a combination of specializing and generalizing and knowing when to do which one. And so in our experience, where you need to really load balance things, there's a lot of variety in volume and different thresholds. And you really want to have maximum coverage, like maybe for a real-time channel or something, that's where generalizing makes more sense. But if you have things that are more in-depth or require a deeper level of expertise, we've seen this with tech support, for example, or trust and safety, then that's where you want to have more of a dedicated team, dedicated queue, and focus on that. But at the end of the day, whether you specialize or generalize, knowledge management is your power. Because even for people that aren't the immediate expert on something, at least giving them a starting point to unblock the user and unblock themselves can really save everyone time. All right, so that just about kind of summarizes how we've scaled support. So it really just comes down to these three themes: infrastructure, so leveraging all your tools and data to model and forecast and track where things are headed and invest accordingly. Prevention, so looking at things like volume and handle time to see where there's pain and address that or add to your documentation and make it easy to get that done. And then third, with efficiency, sometimes you need to specialize or sometimes you need to generalize. So it's just looking at what trends come up, what are your coverage needs, where does the expertise need to be to see, do you need to have more of a named assigned staff and queue to it, or do you need to pull things together? And lastly, wanted to leave you all with some resources. So the first here, even though this report is a couple years old, I think it's really helpful, especially if you're trying to convey the impact of customer service to others outside of that field. And then there's a couple of great communities in the support and CX world. I love Support Driven and Elevate CX. They have Slack groups and newsletters and job boards, and they're really great. And then there's a couple of blogs there that also dig deeper into some of these topics. How do you hire, onboard, train, develop, and coach? What are some best practices with knowledge management and self-service, all that good stuff. And then lastly, a copy of our own staffing model. Again, it's a living, breathing thing where we're always still trying to get better and better at it, but at least it's an example of how do we handle both B2B and B2C, looking at the number of accounts we're going to get, what stage are they in, what tier are they in. We really get into the details, so that's a starting point if you want to see another example out there. All right, well, that's all I got. Would love to see what questions, comments, thoughts y'all have. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dan. Okay, seeing a question here. How come part-timers can do so many more tickets per hour than full-time? That's an excellent question. So remember earlier when I was saying there's different types of users and nature of questions that come up? So particularly for employers and students, we have found those go much faster and are easier compared to education or premium employer partners. So we actually have part-timers focus on those easier areas. It's faster to ramp them up on, and it's kind of lower stakes. So that's why they're able to do way more tickets per hour than full-time. Full-time, they're focusing more on our enterprise products or trust and safety. So education, premium employers, and kind of more advanced investigations with trust and safety. So that's why those are different. Was this your intended career path? What led you to this moment in your life? Ooh, thanks for this question, Eric. No, my original kind of passion and inspiration was to be a professor. When I was an undergrad, I loved teaching and learning, and I loved working with students and mentoring them. And I also sought to leverage technology wherever I could. I felt that was important. That would help me be more effective and make my life a little easier. But then when I graduated, the last Great Recession happened, and I decided, I kind of want to make some money and have some more flexibility on where I might need to live. And so that's why I looked at tech back in that time. And I joined Google for Education. And I didn't know ed tech could be a career at the time. I just loved teaching and learning and using technology for that. But they needed someone that could help all of their schools using Google tools to do that. So it was kind of an accident, but it was wonderful, and I'm very grateful for that. And then that's led me to where I am now. I've realized I love it. I still have the elements of teaching and learning with people and getting to help them use technology and still make a difference in communities that I want to make a difference in. So, and particularly that's been the joy of working in support and customer experience now. When I was an account manager or in success, I worked closely with support, but I thought, oh, I don't know if I like that, ticket. I don't know if there's a lot to it. oh, I was wrong. I was so very wrong. And so it's been really inspiring to see how support can really be awesome and how it can really make a difference. And so that's why I'm speaking today. Like I'm trying to build a movement for people to think about support and customer experience differently and get everyone to take an ownership in it. Got another one. How do you reduce burnout for your team members? Oh, yes. Oh, this is so timely right now. I won't lie. We're working really hard right now. We have a lot of volume. But some things that I like to do. So this is where your staffing model is really key. One of, actually, I think it was another speaker for this event, Nick Caldwell. I remember he wrote in a blog post about using spreadsheets to kind of figure out staffing for his engineering department. And he said something like, never forget that's a human in your sheet, not a number. So that has stuck with me. I always try to keep that in mind when I'm working in my models and spreadsheets and looking at data. And so that's why I like to think about the human needs we have, you know, people being out, people being on vacation, people having emergencies, accounting for that in your model. So that's baked in, so you don't have to worry. So that's a big thing we do. Let's see, what else? I think, again, understanding when are we going to have our peak seasons so we can give the team a heads up. And for us, particularly in ed tech, back to school is always the peak season. So when we hire, we're upfront without that. It's like, hey, this August, September period is where things are going to be kind of crazy. All hands on deck. Are you okay with that? This is what it looks like. Outside of that, this is what you can expect. It'll be more normal. So I like to be upfront with what you can expect to see. And then when we're in those moments, like right now, I like to kind of make it fun and gamified. Like we have a countdown of how many weeks left we have of this surge. So we're about almost halfway there right now. We're actually having our peak amount of virtual fairs happening in a day, I think next Wednesday on my birthday. So that'll be fun. So it helps to show the team they're making progress. We're getting through it. It's not going to last forever. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So that is really key. And then another thing is, what other kind of goodies can you extend to kind of nurture and celebrate and reward your team for really hard work? So we've always had a little fun with this. One year we got matching headbands and shirts. Another year we did kind of a wellness theme. So each week we had different activities like yoga, meditation, getting your steps in challenge. This year we're doing a self-care fund. So everyone on the team has an extra fund to spend on themselves: meals, drinks, movies, shoes, clothes, whatever. As long as it's legal, it's cool. And they've really appreciated that. And then another thing we're doing right now, so because we've had a lot of volume and we're still waiting to ramp up some new part-time staff that I talked about, we're actually having almost half of the company help out in the queue. And even though, you know, everyone's only going to chip away a little bit, I think the team, to see everyone else have their back and kind of help get through it together has really been inspiring and motivating. So yeah, so try to plan ahead, have the resources you need so that they don't get too burnt out, but be realistic and set expectations when there is going to be more work to do. But give them some goodies and make it fun to get through, and leverage extra help to show they're not alone. And I get in the queue to make sure they don't feel alone in that. So those are some things that have helped. All right, good questions. Thank you, Carrie. Let's see, Michael asked, how do you get staff to balance out efficiency with wanting to spend time helping customers? Some of your best supports like to build rapport, which often makes them the best, but however, they can spend too much time on help. Oh, yes, we have faced this too. There's another great article on this from Harvard Business Review called Kick-Ass Customer Service. And it talks about the different personas in support. And I'm going to forget all of them, but there's definitely a range. And some of these people do like to empathize, build that relationship, and that's great. And so for those folks, I think you do want to have that represented on your team because that makes the magic for your customers. You can't have a team all of that though, because you won't get through your queue. So that's probably point number one, is take stock of, generally what profiles and strengths do you have on your team. And so as you're hiring, you want to have that balanced out. And then I think for people that do like to spend more time, obviously you're tracking their trends, obviously their CSAT, their handle times, their volume. That may vary from organization to organization, but at least you have some signal to see, is it in balance? Is it in check? Where are they spending their time? And is it the most effective? And then you keep talking about it. I have one of my colleagues is like this, and we're always kind of workshopping, okay, for these types of tickets, this is where it's worth it, to really build that rapport and go the extra mile. And then for these ones, they just want the answer, or maybe you need to lean on other people to help out with it. If you can't fix it yourself, maybe you could, but it's going to take you more time. So we've talked about that a lot. And I think it's giving them the tools to feel more empowered about making those trade-offs and decisions. Because ultimately I've found wherever you can give autonomy, you can help people realize their superpowers and deploy them whenever it makes sense. I think that goes a long way. But also helping them be smart about, when they do kind of more hands-on, higher touch things. All right, any last questions? I think we're about to wrap up in a minute or two. Oh, thank you. Well, all right, y'all. Thanks again for joining me. I hope this was helpful. Hit me up on Twitter or anywhere else on the internet if you want to connect and talk more. And I wish everyone health and safety and love and making it through 2020. It's been a ride, and I think at least in this work that we're doing, getting to help people where we can is really important and keeps me going. So yeah, so honored to do this work with all of you, and thanks again for being here.